we are. So this is the class I did. In fact, I didn't even look. Some of you may be in here, but this is a class I did back in, I think, 2016, just for kind of getting started in online teaching. So I've got our grade book here. So we're going to go through this and look at it. The first thing I would say is, and let me open up a different window here. Since you guys are already doing this, but be aware you can put everything in. So I'm going to click on assignments real quick and we'll start there. So I've got my big list of assignments here. If you want to add something that isn't in Canvas, and I hope everybody knows this, but if not, it's critically important. You know, if you're trying to have everything in Canvas, if I create an assignment and go down here to submission type, so the stuff that's already in Canvas is a piece of cake. You know, I'm going to submit a Word document, or I'm going to take a quiz or something like that. But realize there is on paper. So if you're doing like a paper quiz or someone's handing you a piece of paper for some reason, or no submission, which is really important for those of you doing anything that's shop jobby. So you can go in and, you know, the status of their tools, you can observe a haircut that they're doing, you know, you can see there's, you can go in and physically look at how the soundboard is set up. I hope I'm saying that right. Roland always is so polite and doesn't laugh at my terminology flaws. You know, go look at their soundboard and say, hey, that looks great, 10 points for today. So you do have that ability to do stuff that's not in Canvas and still put it in your grade book. That way your students can track, you know, here's my grade, and you're not giving them this big ugly surprise where they think they're getting a B in the class, and then at the end of the day you dump in 300 points of observations and they drop to a D. So that's the benefit of that there. If the students are used to looking to Canvas to see their grade, you can make it reflect in semi-real time what their actual grade is. Okay. So that's how to add something that's not in Canvas. The other thing that we really recommend to most classes, I know it doesn't fit always, but for a lot of you, you have your syllabus. We do have weighted grading. If you're not familiar with that, what that simply means is that stuff that you put in the syllabus all the time, you know, 10% of your grade is discussion boards, 20% is participation, 50% is lab, 20% is quiz, whatever. You can do this in Canvas. And so the way you do that is very quickly, you click on add group and create a group. And this should match your syllabus because, again, you don't want ugly surprises where students think they're getting an A because they don't understand that the final exam is half their grade and they suddenly get a D at the end. So we can make it, for example, we'll create something called exams. And I'm not going to do all of this, but you just create your exams, your lab, your discussion, your participation, and then you just drag things into it. And that's all you do to create an assignment group. Okay, so that's the first half. And then the second half is, if you click up here in these three dots, you can click on assignment group weights, turn it on and say, oh, my exams are 30% of your grade. And I'm going to stop there, but realize it does have to add up to 100% once you've added all those things. Okay, and your students will see that when they look, and you'll see that, oh, these assignments are, you know, whatever percent, imported is this percent, my exams are 30%. So that's weighted graded so that you can make sure that your grades and your grade book match exactly what your syllabus says, that it's 20%, you know, whatever it is you decide on there. Okay, so let's hit pause real quick. Any questions on that part? We're good. I think most of you are doing that, but in case you're not, okay, before we get into the grade book, a couple of other just odds and ends. This is buried, but do any of you have an issue where, it sounds like most of you have it in Canvas, but do any of you have an issue where you don't want your students to see their total grade because it does more harm than good because it doesn't accurately reflect it? Okay, I'll show you where that is real quick. But sometimes people do because there's stuff that's added in later, or they grade and there's a lag time or something like that, so they don't want that. Students are, you know, students get mad because they think they're getting a B and all of a sudden it drops to a D. So if you go down here to more options, and I have no idea why they buried it down here, but does everybody see where it says hide totals in student grade summary? If I click that last column in Canvas, it says totals, that will then not appear to your students. So you can turn that off and on accordingly. Okay. And is everybody familiar with, and again, it's buried in here, you got to find it, but is everybody familiar with enable course grading scheme? Thank you, Elizabeth. Good point. There, let's try that. Now can you guys see it? Does everybody see enable course grading scheme? So if you have a course grading scheme, you can click on that. And if you have one in there, you can click on set. We do not have any Bates grading schemes. I have made this offer multiple times and no one's ever taken me up on it. I am not going to make Colin type in your individual grading scheme. That's your job, but if you get a bunch of teachers together in a department that says we've got 10 classes or 3 programs that are used the same grading scheme, we'll be happy to enter it in, because that way all of you can pull the same grading scheme. You would just go right here and would say something like, health programs or something like that. If you guys all use the same grading scheme, and we could pull it within different programs, classes, and departments, we'll be happy to do that for you. Again, want to be clear, I'm not signing Colin up to do your work for you, but we'd be happy to do that in a lot of different ways. Marianne, you're asking if we have, where are we? There we are. Marianne, you asked if we had a standard one. Yes, but this also has to do with conversion to letter grades as well. So you can convert it directly into GPA or letter grades, which isn't standardized across the college. Okay. And I think that's it beforehand. Yes. All right. So let's actually go into our gradebook. So the first thing I want to show you guys more than anything is how to make this manageable. I have seen grade books that have 50 to 100 grades in there, and the poor instructor is sitting here scrolling left and right trying to find that one grade from week 3, and they're doing this for the entire class and making me dizzy. I'm on a Zoom call and I'm getting this action going on. So do be aware you can put everything in and you can arrange it in a few ways. And the big one is filter. And remember those assignment groups that we just did? This is another way that that pays off. So if I click on view, I can first of all arrange them. So A to Z. Now, sometimes that's a problem because you don't remember the assignment name. You're like, what did I call that? Did I call it module 1? Did I call it quiz? Did I call it new quiz? But it will do it alphabetically. It will do it by due date, oldest to newest or newest to oldest, by points, and also a huge help, the one that I use all the time, is by modules, because that makes more sense to me. Here's all my week 1 grades, my week 2, so it kind of flows in a natural order for me. So I can arrange those any way I want. I can also filter it. Again, if you've got 300 grades in here, I'm going to filter it by modules. And I just say, I just want module 5. And now look at how easy that is. I only have, in this case, only one assignment there to look at. Here's my module 5 assignment. Let's see if I can find one with a couple. Looks like all of these are one assignments. Yeah, there we are. So I've got 3 assignments that week. I could go in and grade my week's assignments, and I don't have the other 99 assignments floating around in there. So that's a huge way when you're doing grading to do your grading without having to be scrolling left and right and up and down all the time. The only thing you have to remember, and I'm going to repeat it, the only thing you have to remember, big hint here if you've never done it before, is to turn that off by going back to all modules. Otherwise, you're going to swear profusely when you can't find stuff. So once I'm done entering my grades, I go back to all modules, and now I've got my full grade book, or I can turn my filters off. Okay. So that's a couple of ways to do it. I can also just drag stuff manually as well. Okay. We can search for students. I don't know if you guys use this, and I don't know if anyone here is teaching, a cross-listed English 91 or Psych 100 course that's taught at the UW with 500 people in it. But if you're looking for an individual person just to check their grade, I can type in, oh gosh, who's this Marianne person? Let's see how she's doing. Oh, Marianne. So I can pull a person up right there and make it much easier to go through, like if we're having a discussion on the phone or something like that. Again, the goal is that you guys are not scrolling up and down or desperately trying to find stuff. I can sort stuff by columns to find it easier, or by students to find it easier. Okay, so any questions on that? Then 2 other quick things to throw in for you guys. And then your first goodie of the day. If I click on view, I have this, and actually we just ran into this yesterday with Elizabeth. She's got a ton of unpublished assignments because she's working on it and adding stuff, which is a common thing. Hey, I'm building this for next quarter, I'm working in it. I can turn my unpublished assignments on or off so that they show up in the gradebook. So in the case of her class, half of her stuff was unpublished. She doesn't want it in there, so she can just go in and turn it on or off. And I also like the notes column here. This is just a scratch pad for you. But if you have something like, you know, Emily prefers to be called M. And if you're like me and you can't even remember your own kids' names, you know, you're going to type that in so that you'll remember that. Preferred gender pronoun might be something you would type in there. If somebody has a specific gender pronoun that they prefer. If someone has an excuse, you might just type a note to yourself saying, Eileen doesn't have to turn this in until the 17th. So it's not a formal educational document or contract or anything like that. That's just little notes to you to keep you from the embarrassing thing if I flunked a person and then they say, I told you it'd be, and oh, sorry, forgot about that. So you can just type a little note right there to remind you of anything. So you can turn that off and on. That's our notes and our unpublished. Does anybody want to raise their hand and say, hey, what the heck do all those colors and icons mean? Great, thank you. I just found the coolest thing ever. So rather than recreating it, Colin. Oh, actually, no, you can't because you don't have the link. Hold on one second. Let me grab it. And of course, everybody's wonderful, handsome mug is right over my taskbar. There we are. So does everybody see this wonderful thing? Rather than recreate the wheel, Rice University has a glorious web page that tells you what every single color and icon is. So here's what that hidden I means. It means that it's muted to the students. They can't see it. Here's what these different colors mean. Here's the difference between a dash and an X and a check mark. Here's the warning icons that you can get that all of you call me and say, how come there's an exclamation mark next to this grade? It tells you what that is. It even tells you what all the colors are. So this is fabulous. So again, rather than recreate the wheel, what I'm going to do there you are, is it's posted right in the chat for you. So I would highly recommend grabbing that either now or later and bookmarking it. And if by any chance you lose it or something like that, give me an email and I'll definitely send it out with the resources at the end of the day. But I think this is the best thing I've ever seen as far as putting all of this in one easy to read place for y'all. Okay. All right, so that's that. Let's get to actually, let's see, nope, I'm in the right place. Let's get to actually entering grades now. So I assume everybody knows Canvas puts the grades in automatically. So if you've got speed grader up and you give people 10s and 9s and 8s, it does that. I assume everybody knows, but I'm not certain that you can just manually override it. Keep in mind, you know, if someone asks a question about a grade later, there's no record, but I absolutely can just go change Ramon's grade right there from a 10 to an 8 or an 8 to a 9 or something like that. So you can always just go in and manually fix something. It's fast and easy. Again, the only warning is be aware there's no documentation of why you changed that. So if 6 months later there's a grade appeal and you go, why is that an 8 instead of a 10? You're on your own at that point in time. Okay. A huge time saver for you guys is the set default grades. Realize all these dashes here, Canvas is not going to calculate them. So at the end of the day, if somebody has a bunch of dashes, they're viewed as not graded, which means Canvas will not calculate that. They are not zeros. There is a big difference between this for Emily and that for Emily. One of those says ungraded assignment. One of those says 0. So what you've got to do is at the end of the quarter or earlier, manually go in and change that. And we'll show you how to do this actually in an easier way by doing it automatically. But it's the end of the quarter and I've got a bunch of ungradeds. What I do is go in and say set default grade. And I'm going to give everybody a 0 and then do not check this unless you mean it. Already or overwrite already entered grades. The goal is to give everybody who doesn't have a grade a 0. If I check this, it will give everybody a 0. which I assume you don't want. The only time you do that is if, like, let's say everybody was arguing about assignment, said, you know what, I'm just going to give everybody 10 points. You could go in and do that quickly. But this is what we want. So 0 out of 10 for everybody who hasn't done it. And my apologies, because the test instance, I'm in this so that I don't mess with the live class, but notice there's now zeros there. So it's going to calculate the grades accurately. So that saves you a bunch of time in having to go in and go 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 down a column. Okay, so any questions on that?
Tim?
Yes.
Yes.
So two observations. Sorry, I don't have my headset on. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. One is when I enter the grade manually here in Gradebook view, it won't stick. It won't stay unless I enter it manually, then go out of Gradebook and then back into Gradebook. I've noticed that for the last many years.
It should be. Are you hitting refresh? And also, are you hitting enter afterwards or tab afterwards? Because if I do that, it's not entered yet. But then when I hit enter, now it's entered and it should stick.
I'll try that. I believe I am, but that could be, I'll give it a go. Maybe that's it. Secondly,
if not, give me a call and let's look at it, because it should be doing that. Absolutely.
All right. And then you're probably going to address this. Is there an excused or anything like that? Or is there something that says waiting? Like, it's not a 0. We're waiting for it to be revised. And I don't want to give it a 0 because then they freak out. Well, you told me I could revise it.
Yep. Understand. What you can do is give something like an excused, which will then be a placeholder, and Canvas will treat that as something that the student does not have to do. Again, it's up to you to remember later on that you made that agreement and go back and change that to a 0 or a 10 or whatever. But yeah, if I do excuse, and by the way, here's the wonderful thing. Are you guys aware that you can just actually do that?
Oh, cool.
So you can just type in EX for excused. Woo, I see everybody going, yay, I learned something today. I always live for those moments. That's a huge one. Okay, so you can manually type in. And while we're doing that, are you guys also aware that you can type in 50%? Well, it's not as impressive since it's a 10-point assignment. Pretend it was like 18 points. It would calculate 50% for you. Or you can also type in B+, and it types those in. So Canvas will allow you to manually enter points or percent or letter grade and then calculate it into what you said. It'll go the other way too. If you say displayed as a grade and you type in 8.9, it'll display B+ for the student. So it does those interchangeably for you. Okay.
Tim, do you have to have a grading scheme for it to, if you typed in a B+?
Yes, but it goes with the default grading scheme. So there is an underlying grading scheme, but do be aware of that. Yeah, if their grading scheme doesn't match yours, that's a problem. So excellent question.
Okay, great.
Yep. But if you had your grading scheme enabled, then it'd be 100%. You could use all those interchangeably. Okay. So Elizabeth, did that answer yours? That would be how I'd handle it, is just do that. And then I need to remember to go back and make sure Mike Clark gets a grade by the end of the quarter.
Yeah, that's cool. And the entering the percentage, I'm going to try to remember that, because sometimes, I'll say, 5% off or 10% off per day submitted late, and Canvas will automatically do that if you set it that way. But this is a way that I can do it manually as well. So that's kind of nice. Excellent.
Speaking of which, that is literally exactly where we're headed right now. So on this settings button here, when you click on it, you can have try it again. You can have Canvas manually enforce your grading schemes. So I can give everything automatically a 0. Now, huge caveats here. It has to be an assignment. It has to have a grade. It has to have a due date, because otherwise it never knows when it's missing. So you can't just have undated assignments on there, but you have a due date of August 5th. On August 6th, it will do it. And I didn't realize this while I was researching. It will not be applied to items that are marked no submission or on paper, which, hey, we learned something new. So there's a tidbit if you're not aware of that. If it's a paper assignment, it will not do that, or a no submission. Okay. But anything that's in Canvas, it will go ahead. And if we set that due date at August 5th, on August 6th, it will automatically put zeros in there. Do be aware that it's rootless. Okay. It is inflexible. So both this and the late that we're going to talk about in a second, it applies it to everything. It applies it retroactively. It applies it retroactively. We want to stress that. So if you're happy with it, great, but do be aware that if you just kind of willy-nilly slap it on, especially if it doesn't match your syllabus, and then it's really tough to fix it afterwards. So kind of think it through and make sure you're ready to go. It's a huge time saver, but again, it's a ball peen hammer, not a chisel. Okay. So we can do that. We can also do apply my grading scheme to late submissions, like 10% per day. I can have it do. Okay, I could do hour. Wow, that's tough. Hope we're not doing that. I can also put a cap on the lowest grade, and I'm going to beat Elizabeth to the punch because we argued with this, and thank you for that, Elizabeth. I argued with her and with Canvas and with everybody to really dial this down. Do be aware, if you enter a lowest possible grade of 70%, if a student gets a horrible job and does a 30%, that's still going to apply, and you won't be able to dock 70% from it. So again, we kind of talk about how it's a very gross tool. It applies everything uniformly. So Elizabeth called me on this, and we went at it for several days. I remember going back and forth with Canvas Help to answer this thoroughly for her. And the answer is no. If I set this at 70% and a student turned an assignment that got a 60% and it was 5 days late, there would not be a docking at that point in time because it's already below that minimum grade of 70%. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
But can't you manually go into the gradebook and change that to a lower grade?
Yes, you
Yeah.
always can override the manual
Right.
stuff, but you have to be aware that it did that. Thanks,
Right.
Peter.
Yeah, and I have a 10% per week deduction on late, and so I just calculated out that that's 1.43% per day, and so I just had to put that in there because it doesn't give a weekly option there.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see. Do be aware, do any of you have assignments that you don't count towards final grade? If you do have that, do be aware you can't see that from here. You have to go into the actual assignment itself and view that then. Because otherwise you're going to see a whole bunch of grades and not realize that a third of them don't count. Okay, let's see what else. Export, import. If you hate the Canvas gradebook, when it comes time, to the last day of the quarter and you've got to enter in a whole bunch of things, have any of you ever done export, import into Excel? I see a couple of heads going up and down. If I go into Actions, Export, I can export this entire gradebook. It'll open up in Excel, and if you're more comfortable with that, you can start typing in stuff left and right, put all the grades in, and then import it back into the class, and it'll override this gradebook. So for those of you who do all your grading, in an 8-hour period on the next to last day of class, then that might be a huge help for you, is pull it up into Excel, which might be a little easier to see and navigate around in. It gives you that capability. Okay, so that's a handy thing for you. Extra credit and fudge points. For those of you who want to add extra credit, the easiest thing to do are one of two things. One is this. So again, I just typed in 2 extra credit points. If you don't care about documentation and you're just trying to give someone 2 points, you absolutely can do that. You can't get easier than that. If you're talking about extra credit for a class, the way to do that is actually very simple. You just create a 0-point assignment. So if you're going to give everybody 5 points for how to do a proper citation thing, you create a 0-point assignment. And then when somebody gets 5, it's actually 5 out of 0 points, which adds it as extra credit. And there are also fudge points. I don't know if you're aware of that on a test. If there's ever some sort of argument or discussion or something that happens, and let's say somebody comes in and says that their answer is right, or you say, I'll give anybody 3 extra credit points if they do this, add all of this and go back and fix your assignments. At the bottom of a quiz, you've got a fudge point box, and you just type in 3 fudge points, which then adds 3 points to their test score, but you don't have to go in and change any of the grades they got. It's still marked as wrong, but you're giving them 3 points at that point in time. Okay. Any questions? Let's hit the pause button again.
Also, when you create a 0-point assignment for extra credit, it's important to put the number of possible points in the title or in the instructions so that students know how many points it's worth, because it just shows up as a 0 in their gradebook for possible points. You understand what I mean?
Addressing that, Peter, I was typing something in for Tim. how do we, again, once again, how do we enter bonus points? Because it's going to ask for points, but it's got to be, how do you do that?
Do you mean
Because it's
extra credit?
bonus.
Do you mean
Yeah,
extra
for
credit points?
Yeah.
So are you asking for something different than we said? Because the easiest thing
I
would be to
was-
create a 0 point.
I was typing something in.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. If you don't want to repeat it, it's okay.
No, that's okay. I just didn't know if you were asking something different. You would create just a 0 point assignment and then give them their grade for that.
Okay, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Okay. We are at actually we're at 11:58. We were at 11:57. So technically I have till 11:58 and 59 seconds, right? So the last thing I'm going to show you is just hide post assignments, because that's something that's super handy. I don't know if it's handy for all of you, but it would certainly be a huge benefit to somebody like Elizabeth and Peter as they're going through and grading essays and stuff like that. What you can do is go to an assignment and click on hide grades. And this is going to be weird because I've already graded everything. But I go through and I hide my grades. What that does is that allows you to grade stuff and enter grades in Canvas without it being sent to the students. So they will not see that grade. We all know why, because then half the students go, how come you graded Susie and not me? Or a more common thing is you grade everybody and then you get to the last couple of ones and go, oh, these are really bad or these are really good. I should probably adjust some of these grades that I gave. So this gives you the opportunity to go through, grade everything, not have to worry about students that see it, grade the entire column. And once you're happy with the grades and you've graded everybody, you can then click on post grades and everybody will see their grades at that point in time. So that's a really nice feature in Canvas to prevent a lot of nasty emails from students saying, how come they got their grade? When am I getting mine? Or how come my grade went from a 10 to an 8 or something like that? Just hide them. And then when you're done, post them.
I love
Okay.
your student impression there, Tim.
That was lovely. I'm not going to distribute this campus wide for students, just for faculty, my friends.
So Tim, at what
Yes.
point do you hit hide the assignments?
I
You
would do
hit
it
it before
right
you do
bef-
anything?
Yep, I would do it right before I start grading. So if you're sitting down with the assignments, I go and I say hide. I
And then
grade
start
away
entering. Okay.
and enter them all in. The students will get no notification. They cannot see it. All that they'll see is that the grade is hidden, so they won't freak out that an assignment vanished. So they'll see technology assignment in this case, and they'll see grade is hidden. And then when you're done, you post them.
Good. Thank you.
Glad to help.
What I do when I'm grading like essays is I will download all of them as a batch, and then I'll grade them offline, and then I'll upload them all as a batch. And this hiding the grade is great because when you upload them back as a batch, it doesn't put the grades in, it just attaches the file. And so that gives me time to go through and put all of the grades in when I then reveal that that the batch upload has happened.
Excellent. All right. We're a couple of minutes late. Sorry, but you guys are asking great questions, so I think we're forgiven, right? If you've got any questions, feel free to hang out, but I always like respecting your guys' time. So thank you, everybody. I hope this gave you at least a couple of nuggets of information that you can use going forward, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.
Always
Thank
welcome.
you.
Tim?